Good evening and welcome to Boychoir Banter. My name is Jason Alexander Holmes. I'm the artistic director of the Cincinnati Boychoir. This holiday season, you can find the Boychoir, you can hear and see the Boychoir as part of Journey Borealis, which is a holiday light show at Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park in Hamilton, Ohio. You can go to pyramidhill.org to get information on how to attend that, and I think you should. It was amazing when I drove through. So go check us out there. We're excited. Today's conversation on Boychoir Banter is titled Boys, Masculinity, and the Arts. When I applied for this job as the artistic director of the Cincinnati Boychoir, one of the things I asked myself in thinking about it was, is it really okay to, is it oppressive to work at a boy choir in this time? That was a year or so ago. And at that time, we were having big conversations about the, Me Too movement. We were having big conversations about toxic masculinity. So I really had to ask myself, am I contributing to the oppression of women and trans people by not by being a part of this organization, or is there work that I can do to kind of that would be a liberatory practice for all of us? I came down on the side of there was work that we could do at the Boychoir to be a liberatory practice for all of us. And so I brought some other folks from Cincinnati into this conversation. First, I'd like to introduce everybody to Angelo Sylvester. Angelo is the director of choirs at St. Xavier High School here in Cincinnati. It's an all-boys high school. So thanks for being here, Angelo.
Happy to be here.
Yay. All right. And you'll hear more about Angelo and his background in St. X, as we call it here in Cincinnati. That might be the first time I've called it St. X. Oh my gosh. It's like I'm a real Cincinnatian.
Yeah, you're a real resident.
Right. So next, I'd like to bring in the founder and executive director of Forever Kings Incorporated. This is Jordan Bankston. Thanks for being here, Jordan.
Oh, thank you, Jason. I'm honored.
All right, and we're going to get into it in a minute here. You can find some previous Boychoir Banter episodes on YouTube, and there are a couple also on Facebook. We've done everything from kind of introducing the Boychoir staff, thinking about musicology. If you're like, what is musicology? There's an episode called What is Musicology? Look at that. We've also done an episode about studying music in college. We've had a conversation with some composers and also with some professional performers. So we've kind of run a large gamut. Boychoir Banter started as so many kind of awesome and wonderful ideas have started this year as a response to the pandemic. We found ourselves unable to sing together last spring, but we quickly kind of zeroed in on the fact that Boychoir was so much more than singing. It's so much more than being in a room together singing. That's what it is at its core, but there's so much more that happens. And kind of out of that realization came this series called Boychoir Banter, where we really kind of go into depth about issues and things to think about that we don't always have time to go deeply in when we're in rehearsal. So this is one of those things, thinking about boys and masculinity and the arts. This is meant to be an interactive conversation. We have Katie McDonald, who's the executive director of the Boychoir, behind the scenes, kind of fielding questions and feeding them to us in case we miss them. So by all means, we want your comments. We want your questions to add to the conversation. So with that, Angelo and Jordan, let's get into it. We'll start with you, Jordan. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your current work.
Oh, okay. Absolutely. I am Jordan Bankston. As Jason mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Forever Kings Incorporated. We are a nonprofit organization that exists to challenge the social norms, explicit biases, and stigmas associated with boys and young men of color. So really, really thankful to be leading this organization at this pivotal time in our city and in our nation. So my background, I'm from Cincinnati, so I am a Cincinnati native. So I call St. X. I went to Coleraine High School, actually. So I am now a St. X fan. We have a couple young men who go to St. X, so now I do root for St. X, but I graduated. I went to Coleraine. I went to UC, so I am Cincinnati home and grown, and as a child had a lot of difficult circumstances and adversities, and what we now know to be adverse childhood experiences. I think I scored very high on that test when it became available. So I'm thankful now to be on the other side of the table. Thankful that I didn't get stuck, and really every day I'm grateful that I get to pull other young men out to the other side. And I've had 10 years of experience of working in youth programs and youth services. So really excited and grateful for the work that I get to do, and thankful to be having this conversation tonight.
Great. And we are thankful that you're here. So thank you so much for that. Angelo, same question for you. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your current work.
So my name is Angelo Sylvester. I'm presently the director of choirs at St. Xavier High School, or St. X, as we Cincinnatians now say it. I'm not from Cincinnati, but I've adapted my speech. But I'm in my first year here at St. X, but I'm not in my first year of all-male music teaching. I spent 3 years at LaSalle High School, which is another all-male private school just down the road, as well as 3 years with the Cincinnati Boychoir. So, I ended up in gender-based music education on accident, but I've really fallen in love rather with the work that we're doing and what we're accomplishing. So my background is as a musician, a vocalist, and a tuba player. And I have since started teaching in all-male choirs. So that's the work I'm doing now.
Great, thank you. Angelo and I have that in common, being vocalists and tuba players.
Sure.
Also, although I don't know if I can call myself a tuba player anymore. It's been a long time since I've attempted to play the tuba. But so tell me about, Angelo, let's continue with you. Tell me about how you landed with working with or for boys. And you kind of already talked about that just in terms of the jobs that you ended up working in. But also, why did you continue that? Why do you continue that work?
It's a good question. If you had asked me probably 7 or 8 years ago my feelings about gender-based education, I probably would have pretty aggressively told you that I think it's a horrible idea. I was pretty much against it for a while, and I landed into my roles on accident. I happened to know people in organizations that were like, hey, this is a really great job. It's a good opportunity. Oh, and also it's all boys, and it was like, okay, sure, let's see. And so I landed in a position teaching all boys, starting at both the Boychoir and LaSalle High School at the same time. So I got really thrust into that kind of setting pretty immediately. And I quickly found the benefits of isolating all boys together and the work that can be accomplished in that setting. And it's inspired me to keep going and keep doing that because it's really important work. And it's, you mentioned the word oppressive when we first started talking, and is it oppressive? And that's a risk. It is a risk if it's not done right. And I think anything has that risk if it's not done right. But when done well, we have a real opportunity when we are isolating all boys together to do the hard work and peel that back and see what we can accomplish.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of dig into what does it mean to do that right further later in the conversation. Jordan, tell me about how you landed with Forever Kings. That you could have done anything you wanted to do. Obviously, you're a dynamic professional and you have a passion for this work. So why Forever Kings?
So that's funny that you say that, Jason, because I always tell people and make the joke that I could go work it because I like to think I'm fairly smart and fairly strategic, and that part of my brain works very well. So I always joke that I could go work at P&G and be rich and go on company vacations and travel.
Listen, how many times have I thought I could be rich? What am I doing with this nonprofit arts business?
That is pretty. It's not as much of a thought anymore, but there are certainly moments where it's like, you know what? Let me see what they got open, because I could probably make 3 times my salary and have a very nice benefit package and grow up the ladder pretty quick. Because, like I said, I'm pretty Pretty good, I like to think. So I actually went to school to be a teacher. That's been my dream for as long as I can remember. And it wasn't until I really got into a classroom and was like, oh, wait, this doesn't really reach young people, right? This doesn't really do anything for children. And let me go back. I don't want to say that education is not important, but to the level and the degree that I wanted to have impact, I realized that that was not what happened in the classroom. And schools also can be very, very oppressive places for Black boys. We know the research, we know the data. So it was very frustrating for me to sit in faculty meetings or sit in trainings and sit in all of these environments and see this data up on the wall and then everybody walk out the room like, okay, great meeting. So that's kind of why I didn't fully go into the teacher route. And I did some other nonprofit work with the Cincinnati Recreation Commission and the just really felt that it was time for me to kind of hone into what I knew. The reality is that I'm a Black male every day of my life, right? And I know what it feels like to be that the young men that we serve. And there were great seasons of my life and there were horrible seasons. So I'm thankful for all of it because it has allowed me to relate and understand the wide span of young men that we serve. So just really felt a tug last spring that it was time and started taking those steps, and here we are. And with the civil unrest, it kind of, I know that the people always say that 2020 was a bad year. It's been a phenomenal year for us because people are ready to listen and listen to things that aren't new or, things that I've been saying I'm like, y'all been saying this for 10 years. I should have wrote a book because I would be a billionaire right now. Really, really think that it's a pivotal time in our nation and in our local spaces as well. And I hope that it isn't just a moment, but that we are really ready to not only see the inequities, but do something about them and change them. And so we'll see. I'm hopeful. And like I said, just thankful that we're in the right place at the right time.
Awesome. I want to zoom out a little bit now and think about just this term masculinity. This is a term that's kind of come under really close scrutiny in the last few years. And just kind of, what are your thoughts about that? When I think about masculinity, sometimes I think of the ways that I didn't necessarily fit into that as a kid. Sometimes I think of the ways or the kind of stereotypes that are thrust upon me, especially, Jordan, like you were saying, of being a Black man when it comes to masculinity and how that all kind of works and how people perceive me. How do you think about that term masculinity? Let's start with you, Angelo.
That's a tough question. If I'm to be honest with you, the terms masculine and feminine, I don't particularly like. Not that they aren't accurate or can't be useful, but I think that we have come to know them in ways that are no longer serving us. We talk about masculinity, but to me, if I identify as male, anything I do is now masculine because masculinity is a male trait, right? But then, of course, there's a stereotype associated with masculinity as well. So I avoid the term altogether as much as I can, but some of that is acknowledging the fact that the term exists and people use it, and using that to our advantage and trying to redefine masculinity in a way that encompasses all forms of manhood. Saying I am male, but I have effeminate traits doesn't make me less masculine by any means.
Yeah, I'm happy that you mentioned that, of kind of broadening the definition of what that means. Because, in truth, what I found is that very kind of narrow definition is kind of unattainable. Like no one will ever be man enough by that very narrow definition that we have. Those are kind of my thoughts, #my thoughts. Jordan, tell us about that term masculinity as you see it.
I would have to agree with Angelo. It is not a word that we use organizationally ever, actually. I wouldn't say that it's on our forbidden list, but it probably should be. But I think that it is a explicit bias and a social norm, right? Like it is a form of oppression, right? So it's this set of rules or this standard that somebody, we don't even know who, right, created to define what defines you as a man. And that just goes, but then we turn around and say, be who you want to be and do what makes you happy. And, we push them into college or careers but it's like, to be masculine, I have to provide, or I have to, so it's like, it gets so confusing. So we avoid using the word, we don't use it ever, actually. I've never heard any of my staff use it. And we just don't really refer to it. I think that there are so many other ways that you can identify young men other than that.
Yeah. Come to think of it, I don't think we've ever used it in our work at the boy choir either. At least I haven't heard it kind of floating around. So let's go deeper with that, Jordan, and talk about, and you've already kind of talked about this, how does this masculinity kind of, or the idea of it, or the, not using the word masculinity, how does that work with your work with boys, with the boys who participate in Forever Kings? So how do you, did you rethink anything as you kind of, the critique of masculinity came about, or did that critique cause you to, especially since Forever Kings is kind of new still, did that cause you, how did that influence the way you wanted to shape the organization?
I'll be perfectly honest with you, it never went through my mind, just because I just think that it's very unimportant. And I think that we focused, or not, I focused a lot of my energies on the king part. Like, what does being a king look like? Because that's equitable, right? So that means that I'm staying in school. That means that I'm becoming a good citizen, which is what my focus is. All of that, those personal choices that you get to make, that's between you and your parents, right? So we, as an organization, try to stay out of that arena and focus more on character, the things that I can control, the things that I can influence, which is character, which is grit, which is determination, which is academics. I can make sure that kids are going to school, right? But can I make sure that you are meeting this masculinity checklist, if you will? I can't. And there's no scale, right? It's not measurable. There's no scale. There's no way to. So honestly, it did not really even cross my brain. And I know as I was drafting things that toxic masculinity was definitely a very big topic. And I think that for me personally, we have so many other fish to fry that I'm just like, are we really being caught up in this issue? Because if all of them go to jail, right? So if all of them drop out of school and are a part of the school to prison pipeline, it doesn't matter who's masculine or not, because everybody's in jail, right? So the playing field is leveled. So I think that there are just so many other things more important things, and so many other more important barriers that I think that, in my personal Jordan Bankston's opinion, that it was almost a scapegoat. That was easy. We could make nice, cute commercials. We could have conversation, all of these things. And it was just like, it didn't really matter when you really look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. Like, how much does masculinity matter? Like, does it, at the end of the day, how much does it matter how quote masculine you are, whatever that is? Because I feel like we have to keep coming back to that, like, whatever it is, because it is so ill-defined, and it's such a kind of unattainable goal. Angelo, talk about how this critique of masculinity kind of intersects with your work with boys. How has it influenced your work with boys?
I think actually our fall concert this year was themed a bit about masculinity. That's not the word we used. But in October, we did a concert COVID. We did a virtual concert. We recorded some songs for the world. And the theme of the concert was brothers in song, exploring brotherhood and what it means to be male. That was the theme of the song. And all of the music in the song had something to do with either togetherness or love or various aspects of the male experience. And so, but I'm also in an institution where a lot of my students choose this school because it's gender-based. So their gender shapes a lot of their experience by choice. And so I decided to lean into that aspect a little bit and use that as a tool. So we talk about relationship building, and it's about tearing down the stereotypes a little bit. One of the songs we sang is an Estonian folk tune about some man who's trying to woo some woman in a bar, but he gets drunk and there's a hole in his sock and he makes a fool of himself, right? Just an outrageous thing. But we had a discussion about, you know, this idea that a man is going to show up in a pub and meet a woman of his dreams, you know, and navigating like, why does this song exist and what culture does this song come from? And what does that mean for us? And do we agree with that kind of sentiment? It makes for a humorous story, but at the end, the man looks like a fool. So, you know, you use those, whatever the students are currently buying into as a tool in your toolkit to have those hard discussions.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like good teaching to me, right? You know, where you think about where your students are coming from, why are they in these spaces, and then how do we continue the conversation? How do we add nuance to the conversation? I love that, and it's a nice lead in to this. So we'll say with you, Angelo. So when we are thinking about kind of rethinking masculinity, leaning into this idea of masculinity and exploring it more deeply. One of the things that I would like to come out of this is, you know, whatever your gender, I want you to be able to be yourself freely, like very freely yourself. And you touched on this a little bit also, Jordan, and how like when you say you have to be this one thing, but please be yourself, it gets confusing. And I tend to go really far to the side of please be yourself, understand who you are and express yourself. So how do we think about that in like a single gender institution or organization? How do you think about that, Angelo? And I think you started it with that fall concert theme.
Yeah. An anecdote that I think supports us a little bit. I'll never forget the moment. And some of this is because of single gender education. I was sitting in my classroom once and we partner with an all-girls school every once in a while. And I had all my boys sit in front of me rehearsing. And the girls were off school, so she came and the classroom door opened and she walked into the classroom. Like, there was like 4 or 5 boys that go,
audible gasp, right?
Yeah, I was like, that's weird. Don't be weird. You guys that's inappropriate. Like, don't be so stunned, right? So I think that it's just important that I'm losing track. Where was I going?
We were talking about masculinity and this critique of masculinity and kind of rethinking it. And how does a single gender institution or organization, how do we work with that within those organizations? What's the purpose of even those organizations?
So it's acknowledging the stereotypes that exist, right? And talking about their experiences and why they're so stunned to see a female and the appropriate way to react around other people. And just pulling those stereotypes back and generally just redefining, right? Saying that men can be emotional. There's a lot of studies that suggest that in a single gendered setting, both genders, men and women, are less likely to feel like they are subject to critique from the other gender. So when we're looking at adolescents and the high school age group, and there's studies that suggest a number of things, right? But this one in particular talks about how students are more likely to take risks if the opposite gender is not in the classroom. Again, study suggesting that they are cisgendered and heterosexual, any number of other things. And so you use that kind of study to your advantage. There is less judgment here. I say all the time, my classroom is your safe zone. We don't laugh at each other here. This is your opportunity to take risks. Nobody is here to judge you. And that should be true in a co-gendered classroom as well. But you can only do so much to control the adolescent mind. And so there's plenty to, right? there's a lot to suggest that perhaps isolating genders in that way creates more opportunity for you to explore things free of judgment.
Yeah, I totally get that. And it's so interesting to think about because when I think about that, I'm always thinking, how much of that is because it's, empirically true? How much of that is because of the way we're socialized?
Mm.
And, it's probably a little bit of both. When we think that's normally the answer to either or questions is that it's a little bit of both. But and what role do we have in our single gender organizations to kind of challenge that? And I think you hit up on at least the way I think about it also, which is encouraging our boys and men to be emotional, to cry, to be unabashed about it. Not feel as if you need to hide emotion. And I think about that in an artistic expression, which we'll get to in a minute here. Jordan, tell me about that. While we're rethinking masculinity, what is the purpose of an organization like Forever Kings as you see it?
Oh gosh. So I I would say struggled and struggle with it actually more often than not because I love all kids, right? But obviously the inequities that we fight against are there for girls as well, right? They're all Black and brown children typically, but then when you really dig and you look a little deeper, you're like, oh wow, this is even higher for a young man. So that kind of keeps me in it for sure. And of course, I am a male, so that makes it a little easier for me to understand. But to answer your question, actually, several different kind of ways I'll answer it. The first, I would say that when our young men step into our building, their mask comes off, right? So that toxic masculinity.
Words, right? Masculinity. Yeah.
I don't even say it. It didn't even come out right. So that comes off, or the athlete who thinks that they're the greatest athlete in the world. That mentality, all of that comes off, and we all become equal. And that's done because I have very hard conversations with our young men because I want them to understand when you walk out of this door, the world sees you as a Black man. The world does not see you as an athlete. The world sees you as a Black man. And you're no different than George Floyd or Trayvon Martin or Jordan Day. You're no different than any of them. So I think that that's important for them to understand. So that's kind of the first thing that I see happen when they enter our space. And then it does allow them to be authentically who they are because they're not trying to impress, right? So adolescent boys want to impress girls. So they are not trying to do that. So we have a lot of our programs are in the evening at 6:15, 6:30. So many of our young men come straight from their athletic practice. So they stink, but that's okay in our space. Or they do boy stuff. They burp and they fart, and that's okay in this boy space. So I think that that's refreshing for them, especially our young men who live in homes where they're the only male. It's refreshing to be somewhere where I see myself, where it's okay for me to be me. And I think that we make that super deep, that means like, who I am and all of that. And while, yes, that's important, but there are just certain things as men and boys we like to do. We like to burp and lick our fingers when we eat, right? And that is okay at the King's Palace, where that may not be appropriate somewhere else. So creating that space for them to just be boys. Now, obviously, we still have standards and we still want them to know the correct way to conduct themselves. But there's a time and a place for that. And I don't find anything wrong with them having time to just be. And I think we have seen our retreat is a life-changing experience. We take them away and we go into the woods, and there's no phones and there's no anything but you and nature. And I would say that we got there Thursday night, and by Friday at noon, I had saw all but like 4 kids cry. just
because they were afraid of the woods, or no, I'm joking. That's why I would be crying. I would be like, oh, what's that rustling?
no, but just because there were no expectations. There wasn't anybody to please or anything to do, or they could just really wake up and show up as them, and really deal with some of those hard things that they face. And we have seen how often for boys of color the suicide rate is rampant because they don't talk about it. There's nowhere. And I challenged this in another panel I was on. I'm like, we say they don't talk about it, but where are they supposed to talk about it? To that teacher that writes you up every day? To the principal who put you out of school before you even enter the door? Like, who are they supposed to talk about it to?
Exactly. There was and I didn't read the article. I did the awful social media thing where I look at the, the title of the article and then formulate opinions. But it was about men during this time of, social isolation, and how so many single men are struggling because they don't have actual friends, right? They might have people that they like watch the game with. They might have people, that they play sports with. But in terms of like actually sitting down and talking to someone about life, that's a piece that's missing from some men, like grown men's life. And I think, Jordan, you're saying that reminded me that it seems like it often starts in boyhood, right? When they don't feel like they have anyone to talk to. And I do think that that's something that we can do, because when I think about, I call it re-entry, right? Because like when folks come into our organizations, they can take off their mask, not their, medical mask, wear your mask, people. Anyway, they can take off that exterior layer of pretending to be something that they're not, or that they haven't become yet, or they can figure out who it is that they really want to be. But when they have to go back outside, I think about two things. How is the world going to treat them differently because of that? And two, how are they going to change the world by going out there and being themselves, right? I came to Cincinnati from Boston, and I worked at the Boston Children's Chorus, which has a wonderful social justice education component to the music making. And one of the things that we talked about there was, our kids can talk about anything with us, and sometimes it is a shock to the system when they go outside of these doors and they start talking about that, and the rest of the world is just not ready for it. But that also poises them to be like revolutionary and say, wait, actually there can exist a place where you can be from, the inner city and from the suburbs and actually talk and connect, right? There can be a place where you can, your skin can be brown and my skin can be white, and we can actually talk and connect on things. And those places don't exist as much as we would like for them to.
We have, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
We have a young man who goes to St. X, who lives in a 2-parent home. Very comfortable lifestyle. And it wasn't until he spent so much time around young men who didn't have a father and who don't have a male role model and trying to become a man and don't even know what that looks like, right? That he began to really appreciate and honor his father. And I think that those are the powerful things that happen in those spaces. And he was vulnerable enough to be like, wow, I have a great dad, and I could really appreciate that. And I'm like, yes, well, yes, you should. But would that have happened in a space that was not all male? Probably not.
It's hard to say for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think about, like, to your point, I just wanted to say that I think being in all male spaces, authentic all male spaces, allows for real conversation to take place, right? So adolescent males think about sex, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, what you said that you want, like, no, like, right? Like, that's normal, that they should, right? So like normalizing what's normal, I think, is a great opportunity that we have. Like when I have 17, 18-year-old boys, some who are like, not interested in that, and other ones who probably do it more than the average married person, right? So but they can come in my office and talk about it because we normalize it. Like, sure, I want them to do things a different way and want them to be safe and protected, but we can normalize the conversation because it's an all-male space, and not even in a healthy way. Like, hey, if that is what you're going to do, let's make sure that you are being safe about it. So I think that is such a benefit. And my last point, a very selfish benefit, because I have obviously worked in spaces with both, is that we don't deal with like boy-girl drama. Like, ain't nobody trying to sneak to the bathroom and all of those things that you deal with. Like, we just don't have those problems. So I'm really grateful for that. Like, I can put a couch in the basement and not have to think like, oh, is this creating an opportunity for inappropriate behavior to take place? No, because there's only boys here. So that is definitely a added bonus for us.
I definitely get that. Yeah, there's some of those kind of added bonuses when you think about some of the drama, and then even working through some of the drama, being able to talk about the drama that might happen in other spaces, like you said, where folks can feel comfortable. I want to shift the conversation, or not even shift the conversation. I want to bring in this idea of the arts now. I think that artistic expression is such a great tool for humanity. Jordan, one thing that you said was that I found really interesting. I love this quote. It might be the quote of the night, which is normalize normal things, right? And it's crazy that they have to be normalized, but sometimes they do. And I think one of the ways that we can do this is through artistic expression. Angelo, talk a little bit about what that means to you. How do you use your work as an arts teacher, as an arts educator, when we think about this idea of boys and masculinity and kind of tearing down stereotypes, et cetera, et cetera?
I think when we talk about artistry, it's an interesting topic because to be artistic means something different to every person, regardless of gender. Self-expression is self-expression, and whatever way is right for you. And so when we're talking about boys and masculinity, it's not so much about monitoring the self-expression as much as it is letting it run free, right? It's stripping back all of the stereotypes that might prevent them from being authentic. So there isn't a masculine or boyish way to be artistic or to express yourself. Rather, don't let learned stereotypes get in your way of being authentic. And so when we're in ensemble, we're talking about something particularly emotional, whatever it might be. The emotion piece comes up a lot because men are taught to be stoic, and they're taught to be strong, and they're taught to be any number of other things that are masculine and strength. It's about pulling those back. So it's kind of a minimalist approach, I suppose. It's not about doing anything more or different. In fact, it's far more about doing less, and just making sure students feel safe enough to be their authentic selves without the need to put on any sort of male or masculine front.
Yeah, I love that, kind of encouraging just that human self-expression. And, I think about this also as an arts educator. I sometimes hate those choral concerts where like no one is showing it, like the song could be about anything and like no, there's nothing, like everybody is completely still and the only thing moving is like their mouth, right? And I'm like, this is very weird because that I feel like I'm getting cheated out of part of the performance, right? But I think the temptation sometimes for boys is to do that because it's unsafe, right? It's perceived as unsafe to show any kind of artistic expression or self-expression, anything other than stoicism, maybe anger, maybe being rowdy. We might be able to show those things. And then there are some very real world consequences of only being able to express anger as a strong emotion, right? And those real world consequences can be oppressive to people, again, of all genders, when boys and men can't express how they actually feel. Jordan, talk to us a little bit about artistic expression. How do you see it in with the boys that you work with at Forever Kings, and how do you maybe even use artistic expression to kind of further your goals at Forever Kings?
So I would say I love the arts actually. So I'm an arts fanatic. Um, yeah, so I personally love the arts. And I love storytelling, right? Most nonprofit leaders have to love storytelling. Shout out to my nonprofit leaders out there. If you are not a good storyteller, you might want to become one.
Exactly.
So what I love to do is to empower young people, so especially young men, to find their voice, right? Find my voice and then express my voice. So what that looks like is where I think the arts come in. And I think that we have, unfortunately, society has dated what the arts are, right? Rap is still art, right? So that's poetry. And when I say that, boys are like, no, it's not. I'm like, no, let's print out the lyrics. Like, no, this is called a stanza, right? That's called a stanza. So how can I combine storytelling and creative expression? And that is what we do at Forever Kings. We do this as our first activity. The Biggie song, It Was All a Dream, right? So what Biggie's talking about and rapping about is his dream for his life. And when I had them, my young men do a lyric analysis. Of course, I didn't call it a lyric analysis, but that's what it was, right? And then write their own dream for their life into a song, into a narrative, right? That's the arts. That's creative expression. So I think it's just representing. And that's really what our work is. Our model is redefine, reshape, and reimagine. So I'm always thinking about like, how can I take this normal concept and represent it in a normal way to them that's not dated, or they don't think that that's girly, or they don't think that, no, that's expression. It's just different. You run up and down the football field, but he paints, and both are okay. So I think that we have to not be afraid to have those conversations and just explain it, because a lot of it is just ignorance. Like they just don't know. Like, well, that's how he expresses himself. You shoot a basketball, he shoots, I don't know, notes and fire, right?
He shoots bars. I think that's what the young folks say. He shoots bars.
It changes too much.
Listen. For sure it does. Quick side note, today I was driving and I saw like a young person in a small, like sporty car. And it was kind of snowy here in Cincinnati earlier this morning. And I got really nervous and I was like, this is how I know that I'm old. I just got really nervous driving from seeing a young person in a sporty car. It's too much. Okay, back to this conversation about artistic expression. Yay for storytelling.
See?
Yeah, exactly. Weave it in. I think it's so important. Both of you talked about this idea of assuring boys that it's okay to be expressive, that it's okay to tell your own story however you want to. And I really appreciate both of you for saying that. To kind of wrap things up, can you think about one just kind of nugget of wisdom, one nugget of wisdom from your experience of being, an adult who works with boys, thinking about this masculinity and the arts thing, or something that doesn't have much to do with that, just something that you've learned from your experience. Jordan, we'll go with you first.
I would say normalize what is normal. And also I would say it's, we call it being unintentionally intentional. Everything does not have to be steep. Everything does not have to be serious. Everything does not have to be a goal. Everything does not. And I think that so much life change happens in unintentional moments. And I think we miss those so much because we're trying to always force things. So I would just encourage people just to be unintentionally intentional and normalize what is normal. It is normal for boys go through, adolescent males go through puberty, right? So they are going to explore their body. Like that is normal. Every time a mom freaks out that their son had sex for the first time, I'm like, okay, why? Like, why are you throwing a chair right now? Like, why are you crying? Like, that's normal, right? Like they're trying to figure themselves out. So I think that we just have to normalize what's normal.
I love that. Again, I'm using it. I will try to always remember to give you credit, but I am using that. I even think about, and I've given this advice to like younger and new teachers that I've worked with. Like we have to build in time for fun, and especially in like a choral setting, to sing for no purpose other than that we're singing, right? I call it, what is your sing to sing song, right? Because sometimes we need to remind ourselves that it's not just about learning notes and rhythms, and context, right, to give a better performance, but also what joy does it bring us? And so, sing to sing, but also normalize what is normal. Thank you for that. I'm saying it so that I remember it, right? It's like meeting someone, saying their name 7 times so that you remember. Angelo, give us a nugget of wisdom from your experience.
Definitely. If I had to say anything, truthfully, I say take it down from the inside. That's like my motto. You mentioned earlier, the patriarchy and things that can be oppressive. Absolutely. Get inside and then tear it down is usually my piece of advice. And now maybe not so aggressive, right? But the idea being, if you want to pull stereotypes back, if you want to understand the misplacement of masculinity, you have to first learn what is the problem, right? You have to first understand why those things are problematic and what those things may be, and truly understand where they come from, how you can change them. And so understand the rules first. Once you're in there and you have a full comprehension of what's going on, then begin to break the rules and peel it back and tear it down from the inside, as I like to say.
I love that. I love that idea of understanding where you are and why it got there and how it is there, so that we can do something different. The other thing I love about that is that it really starts with working on yourself, right? You have to, and being, all of us are cis men who have been taught and socialized in certain ways. And so we carry some of those tendencies, some of those biases also. And so what do we need to understand about ourselves to then affect change in our organizations, and outside of our organizations when our young boys kind of walk out of those organizations? So thank you so much, Angelo. Thank you, Jordan, for this conversation. I really hope that this is just the beginning of really going more deeply with this topic, because I think it's something that we need to talk about as arts leaders, as parents, as as just community members, and perhaps most importantly, as men. We have to figure this thing out for ourselves also. Thank you to Katie McDonald, who's behind the scenes. You can't see her, but we can. She's waving. This is me amplifying Katie's wave. Okay, for the world. She's now doing this. And perhaps most importantly, thank you for watching. Thank you, audience, for watching. Jordan and Angelo, is there anything that you want to share about what's coming up for your organizations, where we can find out more about your organizations? Jordan, go ahead, kick us off.
You can always find out more about our organization at our website. It's listed below there, foreverkingsinc.org, or follow our social media outlets, Forever Kings Incorporated. And we don't have much going on right now, but coming up in February, we'll be doing our talent showcase again. So really excited. If you do have a young man with a gift or a talent, we would love to get him in our showcase. Thank you, Jason, so much for this opportunity, and we appreciate the work that you do at Cincinnati Boychoir.
Well, thank you for being a partner in that work. I'm always inspired by the intense feeling of community here in Cincinnati. Angelo, tell us about kind of what we can watch out for at St. X.
Yeah, we are a high school, so our organization is exclusive to those students who go to school here because we are a high school choir. But I can't say enough awesome things about the school. If you have a young man who's looking into a high school experience, if you're wanting just to check out the choir program, St. Xavier High School has a Vimeo page, and you can check out Vimeo. We had a fall concert in October, and our holiday concert's coming up in about 2 weeks. And since we aren't giving things live at the moment, those are pre-recorded and videos for the world to see. So an opportunity maybe for some people to tune in that might not otherwise listen. And I want to also extend a huge thank you to you, Jason. I think this is an important topic, and I'm glad that you're willing to have these hard discussions in this space, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time and your wisdom tonight. And I'll round it out with the Cincinnati Boy Choir. If you're interested in more about the Cincinnati Boy Choir, you can go to our website, cincinnatiboychoir.org. And also follow us on social media. I know Forever Kings also has a social media presence. That's correct, yes. And as Angelo mentioned, the St. X Choir has a Vimeo page, so be sure to follow there. Again, you can see the Cincinnati Boy Choir as part of Journey Borealis. It's a holiday light show, and you'll hear us as kind of the soundtrack as you're driving through the Pyramid Hill Sculpture Park. For information on how to experience that, you can go to pyramidhill.org. Thanks everybody again, and have a great night. Bye-bye.